First of all, I would describe myself as a hobbyist writer. I wrote a couple of light thrillers which were published about 20 years ago, and then for quite a long period I didn't write at all because I had other things that were demanding my attention. And then I resuscitated a couple of old manuscripts and dusted them down and published them as two small novels in 2008. Again, not really doing it seriously in the sense of a commercial enterprise, but much more to keep me occupied. And then in 2009, I produced this, I don't know, you could say it was a sort of political polemic called 2010, A Blueprint for Change, where I set out all the key areas in our national life which I thought needed attention, and some of the solutions that I could see for an incoming government. And it did actually find its way into the hands of several members of the Shadow Cabinet, as I know, and I sometimes see threads, but it's probably imaginary, of my ideas in some of the policies. For example, one of the key things that was very much a hobby horse was to have GPs at the core and the centre of the health service, so that their relationship with the patient was the basis upon which everything was built. And when the coalition announced the health service reforms that were built on this basis, I got very excited. But when I saw the extraordinary spider's web and commissioning boards and all sorts of silly sort of bureaucratic nonsense, I realised that they may have skipped read what I'd written, but they hadn't actually read it. So that was that. And then finally I came to the point where I decided to write the story that had always been simmering at the back of my mind, that was based upon experience in my childhood and actually in my life. And there were a lot of problems with this because it meant, I suppose you could say, opening a Pandora's box. You're never sure when you do that what's going to happen. And I first of all produced a draft that disguised a great deal of it in a sort of modern thriller. And then I produced some historical chapters to give substance to the modern thriller, so that it was a double time period novel. None of this quite worked. And then my eldest son said to me, look, what you've got to do is to really tell the real story. And that is how I produced Hitler's First Lady. And when I then got to the point where I thought perhaps this ought to go through the traditional publishing route, but talking to agents and all the rigmarole of publishers, it's a chaotic, completely chaotic environment, and at my age I didn't really want to be bothered with it. I'm not impressed with people who say they receive 1,000 manuscripts a week, but they only ever choose 3 in a year. I mean, this is just ludicrous. Either they should stop these things coming in, or they should have a better system. I mean, it's just nonsense. And then they started saying, well, this is an explosive book, and it's a sensational story, but we want it as non-fiction. And then it becomes one of these dry sort of academic works that actually are quite difficult to read and are constantly quoting from papers and bits and pieces and things. They don't really, you're not living in it, you're looking at it. And it has always seemed to me that great events of history are best remembered by the fictional accounts. For many years I was obsessed by the American Civil War, about which more has been written than any other event in history, more books published. And, but of all of these hundreds of thousands of books, there's only one that everybody really remembers, and that's Gone with the Wind. And that's fiction. But it is probably the most accurate account of what the war was really like for the people who were living it. And also what the war was really about for the people who were taking part in it. So, although my novel is not on the scale of Gone with, well, at least I don't think it is, there was a certain inspiration from there that said the best way to tell a really unusual take of the events of the Nazi era and the Second World War is to do this as fiction. Because only as fiction can you actually join up loose ends that nobody seems to know the answer to, and only as fiction can you make the events really live, and only as fiction can you get behind the characters who present themselves to us as great giants of the day through the media. But who is it behind there? And this is where I think fiction is better. And so I decided that I'd had enough of all these people and I was going to go it alone.